Hello there, everybody. Welcome to Mythology and More Research Lab. What questions do you have today? We're talking about serpents, we're talking about snakes, and answering your questions live, or hey, replay. We'll catch yours next time. Care to join us?
You say I make you nervous, a tragedy, I'm a beautiful disaster, a reckoning, you wonder how I got this way. You think I'm someone to be saved, someone to clean up and tame. Oh, some things never change, never change. Oh. You think I would look pretty on your arm once you cover up my bruises and battle scars, but it always ends the same.
Welcome on in, everybody, to Mythology and More Research Lab. My name is Jenna O'Malley. I am your soul writer. I has a co-host. Oh, she's over there. Hi, Mama Maggie.
Hello, lovelies. Mama Maggie Ward, independent author, stroke survivor, migraine overcomer, and oh look, I have a book of twisted mythology, Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian mythology, all overlapping in the Great Game of the Gods. So yes, Spartan Chimera. Yes, it is the year of the snake, and this is the attempt to do snakes, serpents, and sea serpents number 2.
Well, technically 3, but day 2.
Day
3.
Because yeah, we had issues. We had all the issues with all of the tech. And so yeah.
You're on tech gremlin duty.
Yeah, Miranda, okay, we are going to leave these up and open because they're just so interesting. So
these are going to be left public forever, Smalls. Forever. Hello, Pasqua, as well. Good question.
Okay, so I've got a few things we're going to start off with. And Jenna, do you have anything you want to say before I begin?
Other than snakes are cool as long as they're on the other side of the room from me and not inside my people circle. Thank you.
I can go get my snake. I have a snake in a cage.
We are now entering our show and tell portion of the show, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. Snake,
I'll do it after we take a little break.
Snake.
I'll do it after a little bit. Besides, I have to put the princess. Shiley has to go out, or she will have meat rope because she does like the meat ropes. Yeah. Alrighty then. Okay, so Jenna, can you share my screen? Yes. Okay, so the year of the snake is the Chinese New Year this year. It's a very, like they say, it's the snake's gifts are wisdom and mystical abilities. But in the Asian mythologies, the snakes are a symbol of rebirth, renewal. They're a symbol of determination because you put a snake in a box and the snake is going to find a way out. So that is that they have very, very different meanings from the traditional Judeo-Christian serpent and Eve mythology. And so we're not going to touch on any of that because pretty much everyone knows the whole Judeo-Christian Eve and the serpent cast everyone out of the garden because she couldn't say no and yeah, whatever. So we're going to talk about different mythologies. And the interesting end is the snake is a very pervasive myth. Snakes are respected in most cultures. And it's not just the, oh, they're going to bite me and I'm going to die kind of respect. It is they're respected for their other traits, for their other abilities. In the year of the snake, one of the things they talk about is not only is it a time for renewal and new beginnings, but it is a time for renewing yourself, for shedding your skin, becoming a new person. And like so many other mythologies, there's actually an Asian myth about the farmer and the serpent, which is very much Aesop's fable of the toad and the scorpion. And in some of them, he's cleaning the rice paddy. He's working in the mountains or he's working in the fields doing the rice. And he puts either the snake in his pocket or he puts it on the brim of his hat. And at the end of the day, he carries it and he goes to put it down and the snake bites him. And he's like, why did you bite me? And I'm a snake. That's what I do. There's also Native American myths about snakes that, you walk around their rocks. You don't walk over their rocks. You watch where you step. You don't step in them. There is one myth about how the way the rattlesnake got its rattle is because snakes, they're determined, they're shy, they're mild-mannered. They really just want to be left alone, but they kept getting stepped on. And so the snake asked the Great Spirit, please, can you help me have a way to warn people so I don't get stepped on and bite them and kill them? And that's
I hear that about their hiss, not just their rattle, because some snakes have a very signature
They have a very deep
hiss. Yeah.
In fact, bull snakes can hiss and make a click in their throat that sounds like a rattlesnake rattle. So, but there's all these myths about snakes are not the bad guys. That they're actually, they're actually the ones that help. There's a Croatian story about a snake that steals a key and carries it in its mouth to help a princess escape. And so, we have all these stories about snakes that have been basically erased with the much broader advent of the Christian religion because snakes are seen as evil. We all have heard the tale how St. Patrick cast the snakes out of Ireland. And honestly, most of the snakes that were there were non-indigenous invasive species that hitchhiked on other boats and couldn't survive the climate. So, yeah, but really the snake mythology goes back tens of thousands of years. And we know this through stone carvings. We know this because we have found not just carvings of snakes, but carved snake toys in some of the oldest cities in Peru and South America and Egypt. There are little carved animals, snake fetishes, and they used to think that, these must have been religious relics, and now we've realized they were just toys.
Or in the case of the Egyptians, it just so happened that was easy to make with the jewelry materials of the time to roll something into be an arm cuff, and that snake shape of kind of a spiral snake was easier to take on and off than a full cuff, especially around the elbow. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it was just a matter of, hey, this functioned like, let's do it, and it stuck.
Yeah. But it's like in the Hopi religions of North America, they viewed snakes as symbols of healing and transformation. It's the same with the Dene. There are stories about how at the end of the fourth world and the beginning of the fifth world, which is where we are now, that the snake people actually led the human people and all the animals underneath the ground to hide in a giant cavern while the world was transformed, and then led them back to the surface at the end of the Great Transformation. So snakes are very, very much ingrained in all mythologies. I mean, the Hindus believe in the serpent king, Vatsuki, and Mayans. If we continue in Mesoamerica, everyone knows who Quetzalcoatl is. The great, where is it? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. The feathered serpent of Quetzalcoatl. He was actually responsible for creating the world. He got in a fight with his brother, and the world was created afterwards. And there are several Mesoamerican, especially the Nahuatl or Aztec, about feathered serpents or serpent adjacent things. Kotlik was the snake goddess. She has this terrifying, it's two snakes that are touching noses for her head Around her neck, she was wearing hands, human hearts, and a skull to symbolize that to have life, you have to consume life. And she's also wearing, if you look, this very intricate snake, and she was called the Snake Queen, or she who wears a snake skirt.
She's kind of, in some ways, it's not a direct comparison, but she's almost like Medusa in those ways. For those of you who have seen, I want to say, more modern day comic book TV renditions of Medusa, started to be similar to that.
Kotlek is she is a very different goddess, depending on whether you are looking at her from the Mayan point of view, from the Aztec point of view, or from the southern Navajo and Apache point of view. This serpent goddess is looked at very differently as being either a goddess of death or a goddess of fertility and life. And there's some very interesting stories. We all know that Quetzalcoatl was the feathered serpent, created the world, but another name for Quetzalcoatl in the Mayan is I have to look at his name to say it properly. It's Kukulkan.
Yep, that's how I would say
or
it.
Kekremetz. And he was called the vision serpent, and it's a feathered serpent. When he opens its mouth, a human head is there. And this is a symbol of a storm god. Some of them see him as a death god. Some of them see him as a god that wanders between the worlds. There's one story that he grew up as a boy and then turned into a serpent. But the difference is a few hundred miles and a few hundred years changed this from a death god to a life god. And that,
some people argue two sides, same coin anyway, so it kind of makes sense. Which side of the coin are you looking at? Question mark?
Well, it depends, because the Nahuatl or Aztec culture and the Mayan cultures were very, very different cultures. And for so many years, they have been lumped together simply because of what's called the stone and bone bias, which means if you don't build in stone and write, because they used to carve words and stuff on bones. But if you don't build in stone and write, then you're not considered an advanced culture. And we now know that the Mayans and the Aztecs were both very, very advanced, very scientific communities, that they had maps, they had aquifers, they had roads, which have been destroyed by the jungle. They had a written language more than just their pictograms that are preserved in their carved temples. And unfortunately, the climate where these kingdoms existed does not do well for any sort of a reed paper or leather.
Nope. And that's what they had access to.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
if you want a good channel to do a deep dive on the history of language, Crash Course History has a history of writing video that goes deeper into some of the things Mama Maggie just said that might be worth watching after this.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is Kotlek is seen as in both of these Mayan and Aztec cultures as a respected goddess. She is the serpent skirt, the serpent woman, and here's another thing is she gave birth to 402 children. And her
Goddess bless her, please. That's a lot of kids.
Her first child was Kohalzakwe, who is the moon goddess, she who dances with bells, she who brings the summer rain and flowers. And then there were her 400 brothers that were born, which were considered the stars in the sky. And then Kohalzakwe was given a prophecy by Quetzalcoatl that if her mother, Kotlik, gives birth to the youngest son, Huitzilopochtli, which is the Aztec god of war, and the sun, that he will destroy the earth. So Coyolxauhqui led her 400 brothers to try to capture her mother to stop the baby from being born. And Huitzilopochtli jumped from his mother's womb, fully dressed in armor, kind of like Athena, and fought the war against his brothers. And he gained the power of most of his 400 brothers because he would kill them and put on their skin. And he made a cloak out of the skins of his brothers. And there is a very famous piece of Aztec and Mayan that was right at the cusp between the Aztec and the Mayan empires. It is called the Wheel of Coyolxauhqui, and it is an image of her, and it is carved so amazingly, and she has been dismembered. And it's this, and she's still alive though, because she's an earth goddess, and her bones are sticking out and the blood is sticking out. And that was during the Battle of the 400. And Huitzilopochtli threw her head into the sky and it became the moon. And as the moon is waxing, you can see her profile. That's what they believe. But the Serpent Mountain, where all this happened, there's two places where it's located. It's either located outside of Mexico City, which is the modern interpretation of where the mountain was. The more likely location is actually in Volcano National Park in Mexico, where the Pelée volcano is. Because there is a mountaintop that literally looks like a serpent curling. It looks like a serpent curling. And the story is that Kotlik would walk around the edge of the mountain, sweeping the path of the serpent every day until there were no trees left. So very, very interesting mythology about life and rebirth. And from Mesoamerica, I honestly believe that Mesoamerica does not get enough historical references about when we are doing mythology, when people are writing mythology. Everybody does Greek mythology. Everybody does Irish mythology. Everybody does Norse mythology. People are starting to do Chinese, Japanese, Korean mythology, but not so much. But Mesoamerican mythology, so interesting. Everyone, I think, should. I use the Kotlik, Coyolxauhqui, and Huitzilopochtli story in my Servants of the Moon series as the background story. And you really, once you get into the third book, you really start getting into the mythology behind it. And how from like the second or third century Common Era, when they were first worshiping Coyolxauhqui and Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli, there were no human sacrifices. There were no human sacrifices at all. And there wasn't, and in the earliest records, there is no record of this war between the moon and the sun. It wasn't until about the 10th or 12th century Common Era that the story starts popping up about the war between the sun and the moon, and that how the sun was wearing the skins of his brothers to steal their power. And so it's like, it makes this very interesting thing is what changed between the benevolent sun god and his sister to the war sun god and his sister, the warrior goddess.
Comparatively, in Egyptian mythology, this is whether or not you believe that Set and Osiris actually hated each other.
Yeah, and it was a shift because it wasn't until like the 13th century Common Era that human sacrifices actually began. The older ones, it was extremely rare. It was mostly animal sacrifices. Very, very rarely you would find a adult or child sacrifice. Very, very rarely. But once you hit up to that century, 2 centuries before colonization started, there are so many bones. And they weren't just sacrificed at the temples. There were places where they would cut your throat, throw you in a pit.
It makes you wonder what was going on culturally at the time that we just don't know about because it was lost in part when stuff like that pops up too.
We do know there was a shift more towards sun worshiping, and that there was a war where 3 of the kings literally stood against the priest kings. And they survived. 2 of the 3 survived the war the first time around, but like 50 years later, the priest kings won and took over the empire. So this was the religious shift was a very long shift, and the worship of the snake, the reverence of the snake gods, and the descendants of the snake goddess, really took a dramatic shift. And that was also Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl went from being was a god of destruction, a god of visions, a god of the night. The other one was the feathered serpent, the serpent of the sun, the creator of life. So this shift in the religion happened as one empire waned and the other empire grew.
And in some cases, you'll see this not just full empire to full empire, but maybe either father to son, or in some cases, mother to daughter.
To look at something like that, let's see, where is that?
Because in the
when you look into the Egyptian mythology, to have the lineage is when the uraeus, which was that snake symbol that they wore on the Egyptian pharaohs wore on their crowns, that was like this, that became the symbol of regeneration and reincarnation with Osiris. Now there's 2 goddesses, Nephthys and Wadjet. And
there's also Sekhmet, who can have a snake form depending on whether or not they combine her with there's a Greek goddess she gets combined with sometimes.
But then, and you also have the symbolization of Apophis, which is the demon serpent, who is attempting to consume the sun, which is why Ra has his beetle pushing the sun to keep going every day.
In comparison to Apollo and Ares from Greek and Roman. I think they stole that from the Egyptians, honestly.
Yeah. So it is very interesting the way the serpents come in, because there is more than one group that has the serpent devourer of the world. It is in Norse mythology, it is in Egyptian mythology, and it is in Chinese mythology, that either the serpent is trying to devour the sun and destroy the world, or the serpent is actually trying to destroy the world itself, which is very different from the North American continent's beliefs and Mesoamerican beliefs that serpents actually helped create the world. And those far, far ancient, we're talking about 5,000-year-old stories, 4,000, 5,000-year-old stories, things that were developing at the same time as the Judeo-Christian religion, brought in this idea of serpents as the destroyers. And serpents as the keeper of the lands of the dead, serpents as the ones who guard the tombs, serpents as the ones that you can't trust them.
No, you cannot.
And
but that's a very Moses spin on the tail. I would circa plant that.
Yeah, it really, really is. I love this picture of the snake. This is a blue reed snake from Malaysia.
Like frogs, I have to give snakes this credit. So freaking this way, Jenna. So freaking cool.
Yeah, they're so pretty. So pretty. And another reason like that like snakes are considered like things from like myth and looked at. I'm going to zoom in on this. Do you see this right here? This picture was taken in the 1950s from an airplane. This is a living snake. It actually rose up and struck at the guy flying over it, trying to take the picture of it. It is estimated to be nearly 100 feet long.
I would believe that some desert snake and some sea serpents too.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
This is in the Amazon, which, if you know anything about the Amazon, you know that they have some giant ass snakes down there.
You go there to grow and get lost, apparently.
Yeah. So yeah, but you can see, I mean, if you live in a place with snakes that are over 100 feet long, if you live in a place where snakes glide from tree to tree, you would assume they had feathers. You would begin to believe that, you know, that snakes are the things that control life, that control the world. And it gets very, very interesting in the mythology about the symbolism of serpents and how there is something in our squirrely little primate brain that equates snakes with something that will harm us. And
it's either it'll poison us, or even if you're dwindling it down to something of a similar shape with like an earthworm, it's slimy in texture. And
well, there's an old Hopi myth that you have to make sure there are no snakes in the house before you give birth, because snakes are a symbol of the umbilical cord from the earth to humans joining us together. But also, if someone is giving birth, the snakes will attack the umbilical cord because they see it as a snake. So
they could potentially, that's true.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. But because of snakes' ability to like lay multiple eggs, their ability to shed their skin and to they have come to symbolize immortality, fertility, transformation, rebirth, healing. In the Hindu religion, snakes represent passion. They represent saving your energy. To lie coiled like a snake, you're saving your energy. There are statues of Buddha meditating with nagas, or large snakes, like not just cobras, but other kinds of snakes, gathered around him, and they are also meditating. They are considered.
There's often a reason why in anime and video games, Naga characters tend to be both the smartest, chill, monk-minded people in the cast, and it dates back to this.
Yes. Yeah. And it's then as you continue through all of these cultures, all of the cultures have some kind of snakes. Even cultures from climates where snakes are not common at all, like the Norse culture. There is a snake or worm that is literally gnawing on the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil, the dragon who eats of the tree. Yes.
Yes.
You don't want to. You want to make that one about as mad as you want to make Loki. You don't want to find out what happens after.
But snakes, because of their ability to shed their skin and seem renewed, they have often been referred to as symbols of immortality. And all cultures, all of them, see them in this way, because even the Judeo-Christian myths see the snake as something that is constantly renewing itself. And it spreads into it. It literally has seeped into the consciousness. And when I said we weren't going to talk just about gorgons, because those are the snake people everybody knows. Everybody knows Medusa. Not as many people know about her sisters.
And what's sad is her sister's stories are actually, in my opinion, more interesting.
Yeah. But when you get into the cultural, how do I want to say this? When you get into not just the religious aspects, but the cultural aspects of snakes, you begin to see that there is this double standard, kind of like there is a double standard between masculine gods and goddesses, between the masculine and the feminine, because for some reason, they tend to link snakes and women. Now there is a Chinese god. Where is that? I have his name here because I doubt that I will be able to say it. Oh, I don't have that tab up. Okay, I've lost that tab. There is a Chinese god that, like, everyone knows what the Ouroboros is. It is the snake that is swallowing its tail. The first symbol of this was seen in ancient Sumeria at the same time that they were building the pyramids. This is how this goes. Now, this idea of the Ouroboros, of the snake consuming its own tail, the circular symbol of eternity, actually goes all the way back to Chinese. It is connected to Chinese mythology and the sea dragon as being circular and immortal. It is this very interesting idea of a snake swallowing its own tail. And we don't know where this concept came from because snakes don't bite their own tails.
Unless there's something wrong with them to do that is normally the guideline. Yeah.
If usually when a snake is sick, especially if they've got neurological disorders, they will do this thing called rolling, which is where they twist their body and they literally roll belly over back in the long form.
At a distance, it might look like they're eating their tail, to be fair.
Yeah, it might. But it's very, very interesting to see how snakes, while being portrayed as this small snakes are portrayed as like something that is not that dangerous. It's not that threatening. If you avoid it, you'll be fine. If you respect the snake will respect you. They're considered to be very wise. But then you get into this thing where like we just saw the picture of the giant anaconda from the 1940s. The bigger the snake, the scarier it gets. And that's where we start getting into the sea serpents. Let's see. I don't have those pictures saved. So okay. There have always been stories of sea serpents. Always, always. In all cultures, in all languages, from the Australian Aborigines to the Norse myths to the Zunis of the American Midwest have representations of giant serpents in water. In African folklore, there's the Lukawada, which is the sea serpent that is often seen in what is now called Lake Victoria in Uganda. The Inakambriye, which is the sea serpent of the Congo River in Africa. The Nile is not known, does not have they had cobras that which became the symbol of the Urace, and Wadjet and Udo the Green as the serpent goddesses. And probably because of the crocodiles, if you don't know anything about the Nile, they have significant numbers of crocodiles in the Nile River.
Probably more gators than Florida.
And hippos are also all around. Like, people are like, oh, I love hippos. No, hippos will kill you. Hippos kill more people per year than any other species of human killing animals.
Which is weird because it's like, why are you getting that close? Is my question.
Because they just look like a big potato and you just want to squeeze
hungry hippos. Yeah. Hungry hippo. Anyway.
Yeah. But there are stories on all continents about giant serpents that will eat and unalive humans.
And this is why, in part, the Vikings, they were mostly river sailors. A lot of the front of their ships were designed to ward off such serpents and for like good luck and stuff.
Yeah. So it's very, very interesting. I mean, we all know raise your hand if you know who Nessie is. Nessie from the Loch Ness. Nessie is not the only sea serpent, sea monster type thing in a large landlocked lake. There are ones in the Latakawa in Lake Victoria. That is in Africa. Nessie in the UK. In the Great Lakes, there are reports of sea monsters and sea serpents. They have several different names, but they're there.
I would believe it. It's almost one of those, if other places in the world with those kind of bodies of water have it, why not?
Yeah. And the thing is it depends on where you go, whether or not the sea serpents are dangerous or not. Like, a lot of people, I don't know why, a lot of people think, well, I do know why. It's the movies. They think the Kraken is a sea serpent.
It has serpent-like attributes.
It is not a serpent. Cetus is closer to being a serpent.
I would put those closer to the Japanese kaiju.
Yeah. Cetus it's described as being a long, or Ceto is Cetus or Ceto. It's described as being this long, skinny, snake-like thing. And this is the thing that tried to eat Andromeda. It wasn't the Kraken that tried to eat Andromeda. And so it's very interesting how the sea snakes are portrayed versus the land snakes, because you have the Hydra with the multiple heads. There's also stories about Nagas with multiple heads. So, the whole multi-headed snake thing, we've all heard about the freak show where you go and you see the two-headed snake. That's actually a thing.
And we know what happens when Hercules does not properly cut down the Hydra. The head just grows back anyway.
Yeah.
That regeneration thing.
Yeah. But it's there's like in Chinese medicine, snake blood, snake bile, snake gall and the snake heart are considered medicinal medicines. They're considered used for medicines. While in Greek myth, those parts of the snake are considered the most poisonous part and most likely to kill you. That was how Hercules was killed.
Mm-hmm. And depending on what you take medicinally, your medication may in part contain anti-venom, depending on what you're on nowadays for swelling purposes too, I hear.
Yeah. Because it triggers a anti-inflammatory response. So, but it's very interesting the way people have taken snakes, and in some cultures they're revered, in some they're feared, and the fact that two of the most prevalent global religions see them as a bad thing has resulted in a sociocultural idea that all snakes are evil.
No, they're not.
And they're not. We need snakes for our ecosystem. We really, really do.
If you have a bug problem, you may not have enough snakes living nearby, is something I've heard.
If you have a mouse problem, you definitely don't have enough snakes living by.
I used to live near the C&O Canal. When they cleared out a lot of our snake nests to make room for building new roads, basically, that our mouse population went through the roof. So I can attest to that.
Yeah. And it's, I know that when our neighbor had a whole bunch of yucca on her property, which thank goodness it has died out over the years with help. But the yucca seeds would open up and they drop their seeds and the mice love them. And we had so many snake problems. Just snakes constantly coming, like snakes everywhere, because where there are snakes, where there are excessive numbers of mice, there are snakes.
And yes, that probably does mean some of our biggest cities have snakes living in the sewers, and probably ones that were not put there by residents, just saying.
Yeah, it's if you live in a city, you probably have seen a fox or a coyote or a raccoon. You probably don't realize that there are also snakes there. Snakes are masters at hiding. They are masters at climbing. And so now let's get into some city assorted snakes, sea serpents. Mm-hmm. We know what the Midgard serpent is. We know what Cetus is. But have you ever heard of the Gloucester sea serpent?
Oh, you need to look this up. This is horror fuel. If you are a horror author, research this.
Yeah, it's Gloucester, Massachusetts. Became the symbol of the town. Allegedly, this thing was coming up on the shore and snatching people off the shore.
No, thank you. Near Salem, thank you.
People would if you were on the deck of a boat by yourself and close to shore, you were risking being disappeared forever, because people would just their crewmates would come out and they'd be like, "I thought Bill was on the deck. Where'd he go? There's his shoe."
When really, if they looked a little bit longer, they would have probably found him floating face down downstream.
Yeah, they would have found him.
We had a couple of questions there in chat. So yes, just to recap from the beginning for those who joined in late, this is going to stay live. It is not going to members only. Kara, you're wondering where you can find the spellings of some of the Aztec and so on deities. So I dropped some links and Google was rude on sharing one of them and gave me a long one. So I'll just focus on the short ones. Miranda, maybe it's due to the religious shift. We covered that one. Yes, very much so. And this is dependent on what are they a priest or priestess of, and whether or not they were trained to use that particular animal in their practice as medicine, for example. Kara, spiders and we're going to talk about spiders and Jenna another day, because Jenna and spiders, no, back away, Jenna. Kara, you worked in the retirement community in Boulder on night shift. You looked outside and you see foxes. You also see bats and your belfry and mice. Didn't see snakes though. It might be too cold for them to want to be seen for certain parts of the year, depending on how cold it is and whether or not they like the cold that much.
Yeah.
Because they may be cold-blooded. That does not necessarily mean that they themselves like to be cold, I would think. Or at least, freezing cold. Any other questions or comments or things to share from chat or Mama Maggie?
No, I was just going to, because we're going to be talking about things with wings or things that the name has come to mean something else. Mm-hmm. So the last sea serpent thing that I want to talk about is the Rouen River in France serpent. Now, the gargoyle, Gargouille, was considered a dragon serpent that lived in the river. It had wings. It would fold its wings to swim in the river, or it would fly above, and it would snatch livestock and farmers and stuff. It was they said that to shed its skin, it would rub its snake-like body against a church spire. And Saint Romanus killed it. Which is very interesting that this creature that for roughly 100 years, it was in 600 AD, in the mid 600 AD, the times of Saint Romanus' life, sometime during his life, he killed this river dragon that was killing livestock and terrorizing everyone and destroying churches and stuff. So that led to the word gargoyle, led to the word gargoyles, which in the 6th, 7th century through the 10th century, a lot of buildings, including Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and most of the older buildings in Cologne, were decorated with these creatures, these winged, kind of terrifying looking face. Sometimes they have cat faces, sometimes they have demon faces, sometimes they have dragony faces, and they have a hole through them that spouts water out. They were used for drain pipes, but they were also used to scare off other evil creatures. And so the last serpent that we're talking about today is the French river serpent that later became the stone building prominences that are used for downspouts. Mm-hmm. In many, many famous old architecture buildings in Cologne and Paris.
And if they don't have the water feature, they're a grotesque, not a gargoyle. That is literally the difference. So, sorry, cartoon gargoyles, you all, unless you were spitting water out of your mouth more days than not, are not a gargoyle. Yeah.
And I actually use this in my the stone skin and the Western Queen. The thing about gargoyles and how there was when the most use of gargoyles happened was right during the time when there was an eclipse that went across Paris.
That would make sense.
And in the mythology of my book, what I did was I made it so that very few gargoyles, I have gargoyle shifters, that very few gargoyles are daywalkers, and that they petrify during the day. Mm-hmm. If they're out in the sunlight, and then they wake up at night, the usual gargoyles myths. Thank you, Disney. And but during the light of an eclipse, because the light is so intense, the gargoyles can't survive it. And they petrify all the way through. And the only way to make sure they stay petrified is to bore a hole through their head and out their mouth. And so that's why my gargoyle queen hates visiting Paris and Cologne, because she doesn't want to see the corpses of her dead relatives stuck on everyone's buildings.
It's like a walking cemetery for a reason. That's the whole, is that the Baroque period that they were really popular during, I think?
It was pre-Baroque.
Pre-Baroque, thank you. it felt like the Baroques went crazy with it.
Yeah,
though.
the Baroques tended to take everything ornamental for the previous 1,000 years, or well, like 1,500 years. They tended to take everything ornamental prior to that and try to put it all together in one thing, because they wanted everything to be pretty. They wanted all the pretty things from all the different eras all together in one place.
And if you're hearing, speaking of Disney, Cogsworth saying, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it, the joke now has a not so much as funny meaning as he said it the first time, just a more accurate meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't get that joke because they didn't understand that the 1920s glitz and glam had nothing on the Baroque period at all.
Yeah. Art Nouveau, Art Deco, they did not. They were pretty, but they were not as much as.
That was about more icing, more stucco, more icing, more stucco, and 20 pounds of cherries right there. So, any other add-ins? Miranda, in your series, there's a fire salamander type creature. See, salamanders, depending on, I can see where they would get lumped into serpent-like or snake-like.
Yeah,
and that chameleon-like thing.
Yeah, salamanders. Dragons, like the European dragons, are legged dragons with wings. Asian dragons, some of them have legs, some of them don't. Most of them do not have wings. There are Chinese sea serpents. That the names I can't pronounce because my Cantonese and my Mandarin is terrible.
Well, the more contemporary reference that comes to mind for me is Haku from Spirited Away. He's not actually a river dragon.
Yeah.
He's a river serpent. But what fit the lip flap better, dragon or serpent?
Yeah. But if you look at them, it depends on, like, a lot of them. Like, there are 9 dragons. The 9 suns are the 9 dragons that are in Chinese cultures. And when you have the dragon festivals, they have dragon boat festivals. They have dragon where everyone dresses up and they wear the dragon costume. They have dragon artwork on many of their buildings and temples. And they represent the changing in seasons. They represent clouds as they breathe and they move. They control the rivers and the seas and the lakes. Dragons tend to be linked with either the atmosphere or with the waters.
And I think that's why a lot of people are ironically now starting to say, I feel like a breath of fresh air is coming in my life. Does that make sense? This year is about shedding skins and in a way like that too.
I think that the thing that is most interesting to me between the Eastern and Western dragons and is not just the more serpentine look of the Eastern dragons, but the Western dragons are almost all fire-based. Fire-breathing, gas-breathing, poison-breathing dragons. And the Eastern dragons are frost and cold and water or steam.
It's really intriguing to see. And it's almost like if you were to follow it down the division line between Europe and the Asian continent, that's how close some of those stories trade off almost.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is while there are serpent stories in Hindu, and there are not things that we would consider dragons. Like the Hydra could be considered a dragon.
Hence why it's a dragon type Pokemon for the Hydra-like Pokemons.
Yeah. But it's very interesting that this snake form, this lizard or snake, this mainly serpent form, has so many meanings in so many mysticisms. And it's like I don't think there are any other animals that are as diversely represented from culture
Maybe
to culture.
spiders.
No, not really.
Really?
Not when I was doing the spider research, I did not find as many spider representations as I did serpents and dragons.
That leads me to question of how much older are snakes than spiders as like populating the earth alongside humans goes?
Well,
i.e. snakes might go back further because scaly dino? Question mark. I don't know. I don't know that much.
It's very interesting that serpent sculptures, serpent representations, serpent myth seems to be, and that was part of the reason I wanted to do this year, is because because these snake myths across the board in a half a dozen cultures that I looked at seem to be the older myths.
And I think unless you have more on that note, I think that'd be a good place to leave off to ponder for more for later.
No, that's all I have today.
Awesome.
I'm just glad my power held out, because
I was going to say the same thing.
We were having a panic attack because my power went out for 4 or 5 hours and was just blinking on and off. So we were like, no, not again, not again. But yeah, no, if you want to look into interesting serpent mythology that is not Gorgons and Hydras, is not Greek myth, is not the sea serpents of Greek myth, or the world killer, I can never think of his name, and I just said his name. Yggdrasil. Those myths, definitely look into the myths of Mesoamerica. Look into the Asian myths, because the Asian myths, oh my goodness, they have serpent people that are like, okay, when we think of Gorgons, we think of serpent from the waist down and snake hair. That's not what Gorgons are. They are just women walking around. They were snake eyes. They were snake body eyes, I should say. They had more of the Egyptian. Their head was the serpentine part with the snakes in their hair, and their body was a person's body. To go with the more Egyptian myths, with the more Babylonian and Assyrian myths. But the Chinese myths actually have people that are snake from the body down, from the waist down, and person on top. So yeah, look into these other mythologies. I shared the picture of the Chinese snake prince, who is said to have copper scales and copper hair and be very beautiful to look at and to lure women off to their deaths. Because he was so pretty, and he is pretty, but
there's definitely more room for inspiration than we've only touched the surface on this one for sure.
Because we are a Western culture, we tend to only gravitate toward the Western mythologies. Please, by all means, look into the African mythologies, the snake people of Africa who have serpent-like skin, but are shaped like people.
That's where I got the idea for Vovery's skin in part to be what it is.
Yeah, look at the serpent people of Asia. Harpies, we are going to talk about harpies when we talk about wings and feathers and scales, because that one we're going to talk about harpies and sirens and mermaids and nereids and things that started off as one creature and became another creature, because fun fact, mermaids weren't fishy until the 16th century.
Thank you, Denmark.
And so with that, yes, please check out alternate sources of mythology. The University of Mexico has so many resources that are translated into English. The Smithsonian and Britannica have so many resources translated into English on Mesopotamian mythology or Mesoamerican mythology from different places. The University of Cairo has a lot of wonderful resources on Egyptian. And
you should specifically look up what we know about snakes because of the emerald tablets too.
Yes. And Mesopotamians mainly describe snakes as they helped keep the homes clean because they helped keep rodents out. So please, please look into alternate sources of mythology. I'm your co-host, Maggie. This is your hostess, Jenna. And we hope that if you have any questions, please, after the stream, refresh it, put your questions in the comments below.
And we'll address them next time.
We'll address them next time. Every first and third Thursday of the month, we are going to be here talking about myths that you can include in your stories that are not the normal myth.
And thank you so much for being here. Above all, your voice matters. Dang it.
You should know only fools tread where the angels fear to go, but you keep trying to get too close. Save myself by turning into stone. So save your judgment, cause you just don't know. But some things never change.